Hello and welcome, vintage gamers, to finally the MOCS Qualifier VOD review. If you're watching this after watching the testing videos, you're now on the 9th video. So props for anyone who stuck with that. I hope those were fun and entertaining for everyone. Give you a little lead up to this and how we got here. I'm going to do a little bit of background for the people who don't watch the testing videos. Basically, this is one of the biggest vintage events for the year. Basically, the winner of this event qualifies for the MOCS, which is a very high stakes, lots of payout, multi-format event, which is 8 players invite only. So that's really big, $5,000 minimum. It also qualifies you for the last set championship, New Capenna. So it's a really big deal to win one of these qualifiers. And it's very hard. The tournament is 24 players, which is also invite only based on the showcases and last chance qualifiers during the season. Previously, I top 8'd with Esper PO, so it qualified me for this event. And then going into this event, I tested with Falcon Eye, who was also qualified, and we went through a bunch of different matchups, a bunch of different iterations before landing on this. I think I want to talk a little bit more about the showcase field itself, because this is a very different event than you would play like a normal challenge. A normal challenge, you need to be able to play against a wide variety of decks in an open field. You have like some ideas of what people are going to play, but it fluctuates a lot. For these events, I don't believe that's really the case. There are 24 players who all qualified with a deck. They're all prone to replay that deck unless there have been significant changes in the metagame. And a lot of them are archetype experts who don't want to swap and don't want to change. So a lot of the time, when you look at a field of 24 players in a qualifier, I can very accurately predict what the field is going to look like for the actual event. And so that's what we did. This isn't all the way filled out, but this is our scratch sheet. I listed the players who were qualified for the event, which deck they qualified on, what deck I thought they were going to play, maybe some other decks that they could play, decks we saw them on in leagues. A lot of the players in this event tested in leagues with the decks that they played in the tournament, which is very interesting because that's not a thing that happens in other formats from what I hear. But there's like not too many vintage players, so it kind of makes some sense. So what I came up with for a projected metagame for this tournament was 10 Tinker decks, 3 Hogaak decks, at least 1 Doomsday player, some number of PO players, probably 2, shops. I said 4, but it could be like 2 to 5, and then a couple people who would play a fair deck and a couple people who would play a combo deck, but I didn't know if it would be Doomsday or Tinker. You can look over here. Like I suspected that, Gak expert no props would play Gak. I suspected that DM was probably going to play a combo deck, but I don't know if it was going to be Tinker, PO, or Doomsday. I suspected the people who queued with shops would probably play shops. And for the most part, this ended up being a fairly accurate representation of what I thought what people did register. However, there was a bunch of flip-flops. A couple players registered a deck that I didn't think they would play. No Props, for example, played a Coveted Jewel PO deck, not Hogaak. Mogd played that blue-red deck, which I think is just very bad. But he's been really liking that one. And there was a couple surprises, but in the end, this metagame of 10 Tinker, 2 or 3 Gak, 2 or 3 shops, that actually ended up being exactly what the metagame was. We ended up with 9 Tinker decks, 2 shops decks, 2 Gak decks, 2 breach decks. This was a swap here. Discover ended up not playing Doomsday and instead playing breach, which I thought was crazy because I thought Doomsday was absolutely the best possible choice for this tournament. And we'll get into that in a little bit as well. But then there was, 1 Doomsday, 1 Deathrite Shaman deck, or I guess 2 Deathrite Shaman decks when you can include Bant Archon and the code provider Luris Standstill deck. But in general, it was exactly what we thought it was going to be. We wanted to be able to primarily to be mainboarded versus Blue Tinker, but we wanted to still be able to play against shops and Gak. And that was what almost all of our testing videos are about. How do we, gain the edge in the Tinker mirror and get pre-boarded for the Tinker mirror while not losing to Gak, and Shops. And so that's what we came up with. We didn't end up on the same deck, Tim and I. We went with the decks that we qualified with, but just tuned for the metagame. And so I took my qualifying Esper PO list, and I just threw a bunch of hate cards in the main. Basically, the original qualifying list was this was gone, and I believe what was in these places is an island was in the main, and a dress down was in the main. And so basically, I added an additional Lavinia and an additional opposition agent, both of which were in my board previously, and just put them in the main. That way, I wouldn't have to do very much sideboarding. I would already be, sideboarded in game ones versus Tinker. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this list, the idea behind this list, and then a little bit about the hate pieces that we chose. This is basically what I've been playing for PO since Modern Horizons came out. The main thing that most players will notice is there are no Urza Sagas in this deck. And here is my logic and reasoning on why I don't play Urza Saga in PO. Urza Saga is undoubtedly a strong magic card, and a magic card that warps how your deck plays against a variety of matchups. In my opinion, Urza Saga is going to help your PO deck when a metagame is full of Pyroblasts, spell-based interaction, and those kind of decks. The cards that Saga struggles against are cards like Force of Vigor is a big one, Wasteland, Collector Roof. And so when I look at the perceived metagame for this tournament, as well as the actual metagame at large, there are no longer Pyroblast-based control decks. They are playable, but they are not being played in large numbers. This is no longer the Jeskai Mentor meta when, 15% of the field was on Pyroblast-based control decks. These Pyroblast-based control decks just don't exist, and the reason is because there are a lot of Saga players. So because other people are playing Saga and forcing Pyroblast-based control decks out of the metagame, you actually don't need Saga to beat those decks because those decks have been pushed out already. And so I want my deck to be good in the mirror, in the Tinker-based mirror, and I want my deck to be good against other combo decks, and I want my deck to be good against graveyard decks, like Dredge and that kind of thing. And what I determined through testing was Urza Saga does not matter in the PO versus Tinker Saga matchup. Urza Saga did definitely matter in the Saga versus Saga matchup, like the Esper Tinker Shell versus Esper Tinker Shell, but you can choose to not play Sagas, instead play Opals and POs, and I believe you become better in the mirror because you are the one doing a more proactive and powerful thing. That is obviously, that's my theory, and that's what the conclusion I came to during testing. The thing that is most debatable is the extent of the advantage you're gaining, and I think it's reasonable to say it's not large. It's not a huge number. But because I prefer to play this more PO-oriented style of deck, and not play the Saga style, it was a lot better for me personally to build a deck in this way. And I don't think that there is no merit to playing Sagas in PO. I just think that the Sagas should be a tool for PO players when a metagame calls for it. If all of a sudden, for some reason, Jeskai was the best deck in the format and 20% of the field was Jeskai, there's no way you don't see me sleeving up Sagas in my PO deck. However, the way it currently stands and what I was expecting to play against, I think registering 0 or 1 Saga was the correct number. 1 is an interesting idea because it lets you tutor for Saga with Vamp and Demonic, which can be very good against certain Flusterstorm draws from your opponent. I didn't end up on 1 Saga because I didn't really like it, but there's some logic there. And so what I did to make my deck better against Tinker is this pile of cards. Yeah, but there was an even lower percentage of Pyroblast, right? So we went into testing trying to figure out what cards made Saga players unhappy. And the number one card we came up with in Saga Mirrors is Opposition Agent. Opposition Agent is the most annoying thing to ever play against when you're playing Tinker Saga. Your Sagas don't find you anything. Instead, they find your opponent the Lotus or the Top or the Key. Not in this deck, Key. It turns off Tinker, it turns off Demonic, it turns off Vampiric, it turns off Mystical. And obviously some of those are getting boarded out post-board. But this card just makes the fair... I want to say fair Tinker. The slower Saga-based Tinker decks extremely unhappy. We found that Hull Breacher was okay, but not great. Lavinia was fantastic if you played it before your opponent. The problem with Lavinia in the Esper Tinker decks is it's very hard to cast early. You have not only do you have Saga, but you don't have Opal. And Opal theoretically will let you cast Lavinia on turn 1 more often, and Lavinia as early as possible is the most effective Lavinia. We liked 2. I would rather not play 2 because I don't like ever drawing 2 of them, but it pitches to 4, so it's not the biggest deal. Teferi is quite good in matchups where your opponent is going to bring in 4 Flusterstorm, is basically what it is. And every other Tinker deck is going to be playing 4 Flusterstorms post-board against PO. It's debatable how many Flusterstorms you're supposed to have as the PO player versus the Tinker player. It's something we go into discussion a lot of in the videos before this. But I think the answer is 2 or 3 Flusterstorms, because I don't actually... A lot of times post-board, there's not as many instants of sorceries, whereas there are tons of creatures. And a lot of times, the Flusterstorm is only good from the player who has tempo advantage to protect their spells. A lot of times, you don't play your spells into a Flusterstorm, you play around opponent's Flusterstorms, which makes it very, very awkward. But because the Pyroblast count is low, Teferi's stock goes up. Teferi also just, bounces Saga, bounces Lavinia, bounces both Opposition Agent and Hull Breacher, and doesn't let them replay them in the same turn. Teferi was incredibly good. And then this one I've been trying to advocate for a while now, and Slasher mentioned it earlier, is the main board Karn just as a null rod. This deck can play Karn on turn 1, and Karn on turn 1 can lead to a large amount of free wins, forced concessions. A lot of these Tinker matchups have to or are highly dependent on the number of Moxen you draw. And if you just turn off all their Moxen, it's very hard to play the game. The cuts that we had to make, or the cuts that I had to make in my deck to facilitate this, were not the biggest steals. The second dress down, it didn't actually feel super necessary, and the reason is because we determined Saga making constructs was not a important part of the PO versus Tinker matchup. There are games where Tinker will win with Saga constructs. That definitely happens. But the number and the percentage of games where constructs matter is extremely low. And so what I did is we trimmed down on a dress down. I still like having dress down because of all the hate permanents you play in the Tinker matchup, but basically a dress down was trimmed for the opposition. And also dress down has some very unfortunate dyssynergy with Lavinia and Opposition Agent. And once I add too many of these hate bears, the dress downs definitely can become awkward to play with. In general, I think it's fine, but in this version, I definitely didn't want to play multiple dress down. If you weren't playing as many hate bears, then you can put more dress downs back in. I wanted to make sure I had a swords. There's a lot of creatures that matter. So Lavinia, Opposition Agent, Hull Breacher, to say the least. And then I didn't feel that it was necessary to play the island in the main. Basically, it goes like this. PO is constructed and can be played with as few as 11-ish lands. 12 is a much safer number. I typically will play 13 in an open field, and some fields you would play 14. But in this specific metagame where more than half of the field is going to be Tinker players, I'm always cutting the island post-board anyways, because the island's really there to help against Wasteland and help against Sphere Resistance. So it's good to have the island in my 75, the second island in my 75, so like playing at shops. But I don't want it already in my deck because it's just a liability versus Saga. Slasher asks, did I test Prismatic Ending? I've tested Prismatic Ending in these kind of decks, and I don't feel that it's necessary or super strong. I found a lot of the times I don't have the mana to cast it on the things I want to cast it. Welcome everybody. The biggest thing I found is a lot of times the Prismatic Ending doesn't hit Opposition Agent or Hull Breacher, and you just want to play swords. And we found that, I think we found that to be the case as well in the Esper Tinker decks. Yeah, my answer to Vault Key historically has been Disenchant. But I think you should just not let it resolve instead. Has there been anything about max fishing? I have not heard or seen anything about match fixing. I know that there's still max fishing going on, so. But basically, it's actually came up in one of the most recent videos I posted, from the testing, where I ask, Tim if he wants to play March instead of Prismatic Ending, because March hits Saga, and Prismatic Ending like wasn't killing the things it needed to kill. I don't think Prismatic Ending is an unreasonable card to play in this deck, and Prismatic Ending does do a lot of work in the Shops matchup. The thing is, the Shops matchup is already such a free win anyways, so. I don't like March for a lot of the same reasons, is that I just want my white removal spell to always kill Hull Breacher and Opposition Agent at instant speed. And that was the number one thing that was important to me, was that it was 1 mana and it killed all of their hate creatures no matter what. I didn't have to have certain conditions being met. And that's why I went with multiple swords. And I think I could have even gone with another swords, depending on how I was feeling. Yeah, so my card board is small. It's just 3 pieces of Graveyard Hate. I am playing a total of 4 pieces of Graveyard Hate. I didn't think that the Graveyard would be a huge deal in this tournament. I did think that the Graveyard decks would be Gak. I thought my opponents would be playing Gak, and so I wanted to have Balance and Swords for Gak, as well as Sphinx. Even though Gak has Beseiju now, Sphinx is still very good. It does lead to some unfortunate circumstances where they Beseiju your Sphinx and it's not good for you, but I think it's still kind of difficult to find the Beseiju, and getting an early Sphinx is still very good. And if you ever follow the Sphinx up with, Needle, it's still fine. So yeah, this, creature removal. I wanted another Opposition Agent because we determined it was the best card against Tinker, but I didn't want to have another agent in the main. I do want 4 Flusterstorms, and the reason is Doomsday is fucking broken. You have absolutely no chance of ever beating Doomsday without 4 Flusterstorms. I'm actually like super boarded for Doomsday with 2 Opposition Agents, 4 Flusterstorms, 2 Lavinias, a Dress Down, a Teferi. I can end step PO. This is an extremely heavy build against Doomsday, and it's still not good enough. Doomsday just will always win these Flusterstorm based battles. I don't know how, I don't know why. The deck just is super strong. So for the PO players and the Doomsday players, I want to make sure I have 4 Flusterstorms in my 75. Though I don't bring in 4 Flusterstorms against Esper Tinker. I was boarding in 2 or 3 depending on the build of Tinker. Yeah. That's the deck I chose, and there were other choices. I thought the best choice for this tournament was Doomsday. I felt Doomsday was the #1 choice for this tournament, but I didn't have the reps on Doomsday, and I don't enjoy the deck, so I did not play it. I think the second best choice for this tournament was PO. I felt that PO was better than Tinker, and also pretty good against the rest of the field. I felt like you could play Tinker and it would be okay, but you would get a lot of hate pieces thrown at you and it wasn't super. I would rather play PO over Tinker. And then I thought the other strong choice for this deck, this format, was Gak. I thought Gak was a great choice, and that's why I was super surprised when No Props didn't register Gak. I thought Gak was a super strong choice for this tournament because my testing led us to conclude that Gak was at least slightly favored versus Tinker, if not, pretty favored. and you can make your deck better in that variety. I wonder if I have a GAC list here. Let me see if I have a GAC list. I didn't end up fiddling with the idea too much. Let's see. But I had some, no, that's not the one I'm looking for. I had some ideas for GAC that could make the deck better against this kind of metagame. Let's try this one. Nope. All right, I can't find it. But what I wanted to do with GAC is I wanted to... Well, the thing is, Doomsday can be a great choice, but it didn't seem like anyone was going to register Doomsday, and nobody registered Doomsday. So I actually think that GAC was just a super good choice, because it seems to me like GAC beats Tinker. Like, you're going to still lose to some Tinker's busted draws, but what I wanted to do in GAC was cut the main board, the main Bloodghasts, play more Collector Oofs, as well as an Elvish Spirit Guide to help you cast your Collector Oof, and also play all of your Besejus in the main. I had a really interesting GAC list, and then when you boarded against like Doomsday, you would board in Grief as your Doomsday card, plus, you know, some of the other typical cards, and it was fine. And I like GAC, but I feel like I lose too much agency when I play GAC, and I really like the feeling of the way I can sculpt a game with PO. So yeah, I thought Doomsday was the best choice. I thought GAC was a good choice, and I thought PO and Tinker were both good choices. And I was surprised that Discover End didn't play Doomsday, played Breach instead. And I do think Breach is good. I just still don't know what you're supposed to do with your Breach list. Discover End played a Tinker Breach deck, and Terabad played the Lelia Breach deck. And Discover End just missed top 8 on Breakers. But yeah, I think Breach has got something to it, but I just don't know exactly how you're supposed to play it. So yeah, that is the pre-tournament discussion here on why I played this deck, why I built this deck, what we thought we were going to play against, what was good, what was bad. I guess we can just go a little bit quickly about what did play well. Tinker did not have a great time, but I guess I kind of think everyone played Tinker, and it was really just targeted. I mean, Tim did not have a good day on Tinker. I just felt like everyone came in with a plan to beat Tinker, and I think most of the plans work fair enough. Let's see, like both shops players did very well. Not both shops. Yeah, both shops players did, not both shops. Yeah, both aggro shops players did well. I think people cut a lot of shops hate, which I did not do because I knew that people would play shops. I thought shops would be the second highest deck. I guess it technically is, but I thought it'd be like a couple more shops players than there were. And obviously Doomsday was a great choice for Bart. Bart is obviously, you know, the best, tied or second best Doomsday player with Discover End. So yeah, I mean, aggro shops and Doomsday, but again, it's a little hard to say because there's just so little players in this tournament what decks actually did well. I think that like an idea of like an Archon deck seems to make some amount of sense in this metagame as well. But yeah, it was interesting pre-tournament, and I think we came to good conclusions on both what people were going to play and what was good. And I believe that this was an extremely good deck to register, and it paid off for sure. I'm gonna do the VOD review very soon now, and I'm going to preface that with I ran very hot. You have to run hot when you play Vintage or when you play Magic at all. I think I played up to my standards. I know that there are I found multiple misplays during the event that really were crushing and pretty bad. So we'll see if we can find any more and learn from those. Overall, like the deck did what it was supposed to do and ran pretty hot from what I remember. And we're going to go back and watch those VODs and see if that's true. So here we go. We're going to start with round 1. What I did during this event was I recorded me playing, but I didn't really do any commentary. I tried to just play matches and act like I wasn't being recorded. I find that this recording should be better than going through the Magic Online replays. Magic Online replays love to break. So I would be very upset if I wasn't able to share the matches with everybody. So what we're gonna do is I will play with this on mute, and we'll just commentate over it. And then we're just gonna go through what I was thinking while I was playing, and just see what happens. So round one, we're paired up against Medivh, and I thought they would register GAC or Shops, but that ended up not being correct. So I take a look at this opening hand on the play versus Shops, and I think it's okay, but not great. Also not super good against GAC, but I think this is like a nice hand against Shops, so I'm totally willing to keep it. It's, I get to deploy fast mana. I fetch a basic island because I assume my opponent will be on a wasteland deck. But I like the start. Even just POing on turn 2 for 3 is not even bad. And then Karn is quite good depending on what the draws we're going to see. And obviously I want more fast mana as quick as possible. And so then I'm surprised to find out that my opponent is not on GAC or Shops and is in fact on Grixis Tinker, which is a totally reasonable pivot. But I was just very surprised. My opponent kept a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they kept their 7, and their 7 is Sapphire, Emerald, Vault. And I'm looking at this Karn like game over. This Karn should just end the game. However, if my opponent is not going to have a land, I'm assuming my opponent has a force to back up this. And because I don't have a Flusterstorm, and I can't spin and find a Flusterstorm, I believe what I do here is I just go for Lavinia. It does leave me a little bit open, but my read is that they have Force of Will, and this Karn is the card that is going to win the game. So I probably tank for a while here, and then I just fetch and play Lavinia. I don't know if I spin before playing Lavinia. Yes, I probably spin before playing Lavinia, or I guess I could just spin during. If they go for a counter spell, I still would Flusterstorm. Would I still Flusterstorm? It's a little hard to say you would Flusterstorm because then you can hold your Flusterstorm for Karn. You could also hold the Flusterstorm for, say my opponent goes for a Tinker. So I probably wouldn't Flusterstorm. But I'm just under the assumption this Lavinia is going to be forced, which it is. Pitching Dak Fade in. I do spin anyways, which is maybe not great. I do find Flusterstorm. So do I use Flusterstorm, or do I hold it for the Karn? There's also some interesting things like Demonic, but I think what comes down to here is I can hold this Flusterstorm for my Karn. If they do play something like a Tinker or an Ancestral, I have access to the Flusterstorm by waiting. But I am under the impression that this Karn is the game plan and the path to victory. So what I do is I just hold the Flusterstorm. And so if my opponent has Force here, I beat Flusterstorm by 1. But if they have Force plus Flusterstorm, obviously this gets countered. So they do have Force of Negation, but when they cast this Force of Negation, they pitch their Flusterstorm. So they're actually out of blue cards. Yes, but it doesn't stop Ancestral or other cards on their turn. So I resolved this card, and we win for the game from here. I mean, they had no lands that turn. They can easily have a land on the next turn. I think that it's just it's a risky play that I don't need to go into. I don't think it's unreasonable if you want to draw there and fluster, but I mean, Dante is right. They had double force, right? So I could have. I mean, I don't know if they have double force there. They might have drawn negation too. But if I had flustered the force, they would have negated the no, they would not have negated the Lavinia. So it probably still works out. I think either line probably works out, but that's also something I was very worried about, Ace, is, I mean, I just don't have counterplay for that. My counterplay for that would be try to resolve the Karn, right? And that was not, I had how much mana? I don't think I had enough mana to like play spin and fetch, spin, Karn, and Fluster, right? I don't think I had enough mana to do that if I had to guess. Yeah, so I wanted to maybe fetch and then look for a Fluster and then play Fluster Karn at some point, but I just didn't have enough mana to do that. I mean, Fluster also plays around Tinker. I think both of those things play around Tinker, so yeah, it might not matter. I felt that waiting covered more things, but it could be wrong. So I'm playing against Grixis Tinker. The sideboard plan here is repeal and what is the other one? Yeah, so I'm bringing in Opposition Agent and I'm bringing in Swords for like Hold Reachers and opposing Opposition Agents. And I'm bringing in one of my Fluster Storms and I'm taking out both Slow Tutors, especially against a Pyroblast deck, and the repeal. Yeah, I didn't feel, I felt like it was extremely likely they had Force, and I didn't really have, I just accepted that Key was probably going to kill me. It was, I think just trying to dodge Key is totally reasonable there. So I have this hand, it's not good. That is a problem with these kind of decks. This kind of build of PO is very clunky, and if you draw all of your clunky cards at the same time, you get a lot of awful hands and a lot of awful top decks. Not awful top decks, but you get a lot of very awkward hands that you just have to shoot back. You do a lot of mulliganing with this kind of build, but the good thing is the London mulligan is completely broken. So this hand right here, I probably would have kept if it was the old kind of mulligan, but this hand just wouldn't have an Ancestral. I want to continue highlighting, I think, how, I guess it's been a year, at least. Maybe it's been 2 years since the London Mulligan. So, but like London Mulligan is just insane for Vintage. 3 years? Holy moly. I still think it's a mistake, and I still would rather it didn't exist in Vintage, but I guess that ship is very much sailed. Yeah, I mean, I talked about in the beginning, Fab, about Saga and that kind of thing makes you more vulnerable to Collector Roof and Vigor, and I just don't think it's that good. They're kind of clunky. But if you want to just go back in the VOD to around the start of the VOD, you can watch the intro again, maybe on 2x speed and catch up. Whatever you like. So anyways, yeah, I mean, I put a land back here, and this hand's actually now just very good. But yeah. Wooded Foothills is always an interesting one. Must mean a bad lands. I'm a little upset that Magic Online didn't publish deck lists for this, because it'd be cool to see what people chose to do, but they seem to not like to publish deck lists for these qualifiers. This is an interesting one. How many people here force this Ragavan? Because I know I sure as hell don't. I think Ragavan is quite bad. I think a lot of the times it is a trap to force Ragavan. I'm just going to let it hurt me. Here's a question, again, is do I cast this Ancestral on my turn? The problem with casting Ancestral here is you play into probably 2 Force of Negations. But the upside of casting Ancestral here is you play around any and all Pyroblast and Flusterstorms, which is 6, at least. So I like casting Ancestral here. It also allows you to, you know, play MOCS and that kind of thing. Have multiple blue cards for Force. So obviously this recall runs into negation, but it plays around Pyro and Fluster because they tapped out for a monkey. Of course, they have negation, but we're going to fight over that because we need to get MOCS in for Tinker. And we did acquire MOCS in for Tinker. Not exactly the right kind of MOCS in, but we did acquire MOCS in. I do have a Snapcaster Mage, so I do care about my Ancestral getting negated. It comes up relatively frequently. So my opponent's Ragavan helps me here by getting rid of a land on top that I didn't want. It does give them a treasure to let them cast Fluster or Pyroblast for this Ancestral. I decide that that's worth it. If they have a Pyroblast or Fluster here, it gets it out of their hand, so they don't have it for my Tinker. And if they don't, then they don't get their Ancestral. So either way, I'm pretty screwed. I'm pretty far behind, but I think it's worth the risk. So my opponent did end up using a Force, so I still got rid of a Force that would have been on my Tinker. If I had the ability to, like, play Tinker with Flusterstorm and Force backup, then I would not want to counter that. But because I don't have the mana to do so, I'm pretty far behind, and I'm just taking calculated risk at this point, basically. So I think from this point, I'm super unlikely to win this game. My Tinker just has to resolve, and it has to win. This one was pretty funny because I was like, oh, they hit PO. That's so bad. And then I think they had, like, exactly off of their Ancestral, they had MOCS Soul Ring, and then they cast PO for something crazy. Yeah, MOCS Soul Ring. And then they just cast the PO. And I can't remember this game, but it's basically I'm just going to jam a Tinker and hope it resolves. And I've already lost actually a couple, life. I've lost 2 life from Forces. I've lost a life from a fetch. I've lost life from Ragavan hits. So it's already pretty low on the Tinker as well. So yeah, this is a draw 3 off of my PO, which was a lot better than I thought it was going to be when they hit PO. I didn't expect there to be a lot of Moxen coming down because my opponent didn't play the Moxen early, but they did resolve an Ancestral, so they got a bunch of fresh cards. It's really hard to win these mirrors when you we resolved an Ancestral and our opponent resolved an Ancestral, but our Ancestral drew us what? Land, Mox Opal? No, maybe drew us land, Mox Opal, Fluster, which is not the strongest. So my opponent gets to brainstorm with the cards that they just PO'd back to their hand and then fetch away the bad ones, leaving them with 8 cards post brainstorm. I would always pick up the Ragavan, but I also think the Ragavan is just like the Ragavan is no longer the Ragavan did its job. It's no longer I don't think it has a job anymore. If my opponent just holds up counter magic, then they're going to win. So I think it makes a lot of sense to pick up the Ragavan and get yourself Pyroblast and Flusterstorms. I think I get excited here because my opponent taps their Sapphire. But that just means they have another Force. I think this game is they have like all of the Forces or something. I don't know. In general, I just think Ragavan is not super strong. There are obviously like moments where it hits the right card and it is backbreaking, but in the most part, I have not been impressed with Ragavan in any shell. And I've just been I don't really think it's worth playing in a lot of the decks people play it in. So this was pretty interesting to me because it signaled that they didn't have Pyro or Fluster, so they probably have Force. And so or they either don't have Pyro, don't have Fluster, and then they trying to draw 3 to find a Force, or they don't have it. And so what I choose to do here is there's no card that I can draw off of Probe that will get me to resolve a Tinker through a Force. And so instead, I just hold the Probe in case I brick on my Tinker top, because I will have already played my land drop. So I cast Tinker and don't play Probe. I couldn't think of any card sequence that I wanted to have Probe here instead of using it as a way to clear my top. Unfortunately, my opponent did find Force, and that means that they had they played Negation pitching Force of Will, so they had 3 Force of Wills and 2 Force of Negations in this game. So pretty much very impossible for me to power through here. So I do Probe after and try to rebuild here and see what else is going on. But they have second Ragavan Narset, and I have outcome with nothing else, so I'm very dead. I actually probably should have conceded already, but I played too long here, and I think this hits opposition agent, which I didn't want to show my opponent. So slight misplay there for sure. I wish I had conceded after I cast probe. But I do get to see what they hit off of their Narset, so small victories, I guess. They hit Tinker off their Narset too, which is enjoyable. So this does let them play off the top for a little bit to see more cards. I do want to see more cards here because the Grixis Tinker builds are not as consolidated as the Esper Tinker builds. There's definitely some amount of variability. Like I see a lightning bolt here that they kept in game 2. So I actually do get a bunch of information here at the cost of showing them I have at least an opposition agent. All right, I'm going to skip through here a little bit. And I concede after drawing a land. I still think that I just wanted to board in the same way. Slow tutors are out, repeal is out, third fluster is in, swords and second opposition agent are in. Well, I think Bolt for Mentor is not really a thing, but they did see Lavinia in game 1, so I think it's totally reasonable. The thing is, I don't like Bolt for Lavinia because you already have Pyroblast in your deck. I don't see any reason to play Bolt. However, if they suspect that I will have opposition agents, then I think it makes more sense to hold a Pyroblast, keep a Bolt in your deck. One of the biggest problems with these Pyroblast matchups is that Pyroblast hits a lot of the hate bears. It hits Lavinia and it hits Hullbreacher. So this hand's great. I have fast mana. I have blue cards. Opposition agent's great in the matchup. So I'm gonna play through this. I believe I'm gonna Merchant Scroll for Ancestral here. This allows me to have any Moxen that's not an Opal. Let me cast Ancestral with Flusterstorm backup. Which I do hit. I mean, that was obviously a great draw. I don't cast it right away because I can get the hold up opposition agent as well. I also have opposition agent plus Flusterstorm plus Force. So this is just quite a good hand. Oh, this is hilarious. So my opponent knows about my ancestral, and they saw me play MOCS, and so they got baited by the biggest trap of all time. Anyone know what's gonna happen here? They try to mind break trap my ancestral. And so I get to hit their ancestral and their mind break trap with my Flusterstorm, and I resolve my ancestral, counter their mind break trap, counter their ancestral. That felt good. Yeah, that was. Ooh, boy. It was quite good. It was quite good. And then I draw a blue card, mental misstep, Karn. This game is basically the game basically ends on that card that right there. So plays a Saga, which will eventually get me a Black Lotus. I slam Karn here. I think Karn is the most effective card out of the cards that are in play. I have more time to resolve opposition agent. Then I have to choose between Narset and Snapcaster, and I choose to keep Snapcaster because I can hold up Snap Ancestral while holding up opposition agent. But yeah, I think by playing Karn, that should really hinder what they're trying to do here. It does technically let them draw a land and make a construct, but I don't really feel like that's super relevant. If they make a construct, they make a construct. I'm not sure that matters much to me. Here I have like a bunch of choices again. I think what I choose to do is... What do I choose to do here? Just play the opposition agent on their upkeep. Yeah, okay, that's fair. There's definitely some world where you're allowed to time walk there, but I don't know. My opponent. So I didn't play Time Walk or Snapcaster, and I'm rewarded by playing around Pyroblast. So not only did everything work out here, everything worked out super well. Basically, Opposition Agent and Karn both look great. Obviously, Ancestral Flusterstorm was the big play that won this game, but Opposition Agent being a hate piece here that doesn't get Pyroblasted, Karn being a hate piece that doesn't get Pyroblasted, both of those are a huge deal in Pyroblast metagames. Obviously, this is not a Pyroblast metagame, but I did it versus a Pyroblast opponent in round 1, so yep, that's how we beat Medivh in round 1. How do I close this window now? I got rid of all the tools. Okay, here we go. Round 2 of the MOCS. We're playing against Onion Lotus, who I expected very heavily to be on shops. That it was what they qualified with. That's what I've seen them play. So I see this hand and decide it's not good enough against shops. And in retrospect, do I agree with that still? Yeah. I think this hand is just not strong enough against shops to be worth keeping. It's not very strong in general. It has some nice things about having, some fast mana, some lands, but I want my hand against shops to be killing my opponent immediately or, have some strong cards in it. This one is not super great either, but I think it's worth it. An interesting thing here is, should I have mulliganed the Tolarian instead of the fetch land? I don't think so. I think Tolarian gives me access to more powerful draws, but it could be a liability if I hit no Moxen. Would I have kept that hand on the draw? I don't think so. I just think that you should use the London Mulligan. It's too powerful to not use. I think that 7 is a bait. This is interesting. I'm not really sure that bottoming the fetch land over the Academy is correct here. It's definitely a choice. Always probe, figure out what they're doing. Okay, so they're on shops. I'm a little confused when I see their hand because their hand has a Ghost Quarter, but it also has a Walking Ballista. So I'm not 100% sure if it's Golos or aggro shops when I open to this hand. But the good news is that hand is completely unkeepable. And I'm very happy to see that hand. This is just not a keepable shops hand in my opinion. Though, this person does go on to do some things in this tournament, so what do I know? They are already on the Molda 6, so maybe you're just forced to keep that hand. So here, I know they have a Strip Mine in their hand, and I know they have a Ghost Quarter, so I don't want to fetch my one island, because then I will turn their Ghost Quarter into a Strip Mine, and also let their Strip Mine hit something. So I fetch a non-basic, and I use the mana now to play a top. I know this top can get revoked, but I think that's actually the best thing that could happen to me on this turn. I don't really mind the top is revoked because I'm just going for a Tinker anyways, and I want to get this top in play so that I can use Academy to make mana. I think this Academy keep was probably stupid risky, and I don't really like it in retrospect. This is a super good Ponder. I'm just going to get my Jet to get more mana, and then play a fetch land so I can play Mystical. And now the Tolarian Academy looks really smart because the Tolarian Academy is going to make me 2 mana. So who knows? So yeah, the Tundra gets Strip Mine, and they play a Walking Ballista, and then they die. I really don't like the keep from my opponent. I wouldn't keep that hand, but yep. Tinker, and now my Tolarian Academy makes 2 mana, and I just Tinker away the top. I don't have a main, I don't have main Hercules, which makes these kind of things actually a lot more annoying. But I think I hit pretty well, and it all works out. I hit like MOCS, yeah, MOCS, yeah. This all works out. It does get more annoying when you don't have the main Hercules, though, for sure. And then here I just start looping POs. I agree. Radical. And then they scoop. And so against shops, I'm bringing in the second island. I'm bringing in the Sphinx. I'm bringing in all of my recalls, all my Hercules recalls, the swords, and the balance. I think Karn is actually just kind of slow. Definitely one of the cards I look to take out. I look to take out all the cards that cost way too much mana. But I also need to make sure I can take out Flusterstorms and Missteps because those are just dead. And so I end up leaving in the opposition agent. I think it does like some amount of blocking duty, also hits Saga. And then I decide to take out, I like taking out a Lavinia on the draw. I don't really like Lavinia on the draw here. It's still reasonable, but it's much better on the play. And so I just take out a bunch of the cards that cost a lot of mana, or they are, you know, like you don't get a lot of value for casting Probe. I leave in Citadel and Sphinx because there are times where you can only get a Sphinx, like if they have, I don't know, multiple spheres and you haven't Hercules them, you want to be able to get a Sphinx. But I think most of the time the way you win these matchups is you Hercules recall at the end of their turn and then you get a Citadel. So I like to have access to both Citadel and Sphinx. And I keep in both tops because I think a lot of times you're winning by Herculesing them at end of turn and then winning with PO combo. And top is pretty important when you're trying to chain POs. This hand's great. That means not great. It has a mediocre threat, but it has so much fast mana. I have to keep this hand. This opposition agent could be nothing, could be useless. But I think no matter what, like having this much fast mana, I'm going to always keep. Need the top of my deck to be slightly kind to me, but this was an interesting one. My opponent played a key, so now I'm still confused on if my opponent is on Golos or aggro shops, because I've seen a Ghost Quarter, I've seen a Manifold Key, and I've seen Revoker and Ballista. I think the answer is my opponent ended up playing aggro shops with Vault Key, just like off of Saga, which I think is interesting and probably fine. I don't want to play this opposition agent until they play a Saga, if I can help it, and then they do play a Saga. My opponent has a lot of mana as well. This is brutal because I was like looking forward to playing this opposition agent, and then my opponent just plays a Walking Ballista on 3, and I can no longer play my opposition agent. That was pretty brutal. But I draw fetch land, so it's time to brainstorm. And then I find Hercules, PO, and the opposition agent is no longer relevant. I don't know. Does this work out to Hercules right now? Let's see. Sure looks like it. I decide Herculing now and casting PO for 3 with Mana Crypt Soul Ring is like very good, so I do it. And I actually hit another blue source, which lets me snap PO, which is lucky, because I can't hit a land there. But like I said, ran a little hot. And then I hit another PO, which I can cast. And then I have to stop, but it doesn't really matter that I have to stop because I have a Hercules for their end step again. And then I just snap PO, you know. This matchup gets quite easy when you can end step Hercules, basically. I even get to like let Sphere resolve. If they had another Sphere, they wouldn't be able to Sphere and make a construct. They need to be able to construct. Here, they should float mana and make a construct, but it's kind of not relevant because they're not getting another turn. So then we have snap PO. And then, I mean, I have the magic cards. I have a Tolarian, so I have a ton of blue mana. I get to cast Ancestral. I can now Tinker for Citadel with a top in play. It's all ogre. So yeah, that is just a very typical way that the PO shops matchup goes. There are definitely hands from shops that beat PO, but my opponent did not seem to keep those ones. Or at least their first game keep did not look strong. The second game keep had a Sphere, looks pretty reasonable, but I kept like a super mana heavy hand and then drew payoffs. So a little luck, little skill, little victory. Okay, round 3 of the MOCS qualifier, and we hit Discover N in the 2-0 bracket. I'm assuming my opponent will be on Doomsday. I couldn't fathom Discover N not playing Doomsday in this event because I felt like Doomsday was the best choice in this event. Some people might be questioning, why, Justin, why is Doomsday the best choice? I heard that Flusterstorm plus Urza Saga beats Doomsday, and to that I would say, I think you just got Tinker propaganda, because from my experience and from testing and from what I've seen, I don't think that's the case. I think Doomsday is favored versus Tinker, and I don't think that Fluster plus Saga is a good interaction, but I don't think it's nearly enough for those Esper Tinker decks to be good enough against Doomsday. You can even see DM Bart's tweet where he thinks the matchup is favored for Doomsday. So going into this game, I'm like, 2-0 bracket. Of course, we're playing against Discover N. Of course, we're going to get Doomsdayed. Let's just see how it goes. We'll do the best we can. We have some good tech for Doomsday. This is an interesting hand. We've got the Black Lotus and Academy, but nothing else. I kept and was trying to figure out a way to do something powerful, but I was unable to do so. I couldn't figure out a line here that would let me do something powerful. So I could have gone Float Blue Mana, Crack Black Lotus, Demonic for Ancestral, but I felt like my Ancestral gets forced, I lose this game. Well, yeah, I kept it before. I definitely kept it before fully figuring out my line. I'm going to keep it, but there is the problem where this hand doesn't actually do anything. But the good part is that I don't have to crack my Demonic. I can just play my Ponder off of my Tolarian, and it's fine. This one's great because now I hit my Ponder and I see my main board Opposition Agent, and I think I'm playing against Doomsday. So I want to draw my Opposition Agent because I want to be able to cast it against Doomsday. I want to draw my Emerald because I want to be able to make my Tolarian make mana. And I want to draw my Misty Rainforest because I want to be able to fetch for an Underground Sea. I decide to not play my Opposition Agent because I wanted to see if I could get a Polluted Delta. And I got a Polluted Delta. And I cast Opposition Agent. And I assume I'm against Doomsday. And so I assume this is just winning against Doomsday. Yeah. That felt real good right there. The tech piece. The little tech piece. Oh man. Just turn 1 victory with the Opposition Agent off the Lotus. But yeah, this is instant print screen, send it to Tim. Look how good our main deck Opposition Agent is. That is just like the best feeling, because like, okay, I did this very purposefully, like, and it paid off. Hell yeah. And so I look at this hand. I don't believe, I gotta go back here. I didn't board like they're on Doomsday because I actually knew they weren't on Doomsday. By the time that the first game ended, I actually knew they weren't on Doomsday. And they were actually on Grixis Tinker Breach. So it's actually really interesting that they conceded to Opposition Agent there to conceal their deck, even though sometimes you just you have information and you know. It's got extra value, whereas they think they concealed their deck, but they didn't actually conceal their deck. And it just shows that Opposition Agent is actually still good against other matchups. Well, I had seen a post from someone who played against Discover N talking about a Ragavan. I didn't actually ask anyone or see and tell anyone, but I did see a post about a Ragavan. So when you have the info, you might as well use it. So I keep in Swords, and I assume my opponent is on Grixis Tinker. This hand is great. It has a Mentor. It has a Misstep. This hand would also be good against Doomsday. Obviously, the Swords isn't good against Doomsday, but I mean, if he was on Ragavan Doomsday, it'd be great. My opponent leads on Saga Go, which is just a great sign because Mentor is super good against Saga. And I have Mentor with Flusterstorm backup. This is a super cool game. It gets pretty scary. So I get to resolve my Mentor, and I'm passing the turn with decent mana, Merchant Scroll, Misstep against Saga. And then my opponent casts Ancestral. I have the Misstep, which is insane. And I'm like, man, I think I'm going to win this one. Merchant Scroll here lets me get PO. Tolarian gives me exactly enough mana to cast my PO. PO back, both things. Triggers. Draw all mana. Do the math. And find out my turn 2 kill is currently 3 damage short. I then punt here. I know I want to cast Swords to Plowshares because I want to get 2 more damage and put them to 1 and turn off fetch lands. No. I did the math, and I knew that I was going to put them to 1 to turn off fetch lands. I should not Swords my weakest monk. I should Swords my strongest monk and gain 6 life. That one really annoyed me after I did that. But I know that when I cast this, I'm going to be dealing them 17 damage, so that will turn off fetch lands. And I actually think I win this game because I Swords my own monk here. I should have obviously Swords the monk that gains me 7 life. So then I smack my head, realizing I'm a dumb idiot, and I could have 6 more life. And then I'm thinking, then I'm sitting here and going, okay, how do I lose this game? What does Discover End do that causes me to lose this game? And Discover End goes in the tank. Like, this is not a long match, and almost all of it is Discover End in the tank here. And I'm like, well, they probably have Vault Key. There's probably some ways that if they if they hit the right card off of like a preordain or something, then this is probably fine. And Discover End is deep in the tank here, and I'll let it play out, I guess. Well, we'll see what happens. Yeah, I was so scared. I think I was typing to Tim here like, oh no, he's thinking. I think we're gonna die to Discover End anyways. Oh no, I would skip ahead a little bit, because like I said, look at me, because I'm just sweating and I'm just like, what am I supposed to do? I have nothing left to do. I have played my Magic the Gathering. My Magic the Gathering has been played. What? Check out the other matches, see what's happening on Twitter. Yeah, that's how this was going. You can't take the Doomsday out of the Doomsday player. All right. And then, after 5 minutes, my opponent gets Black Lotus and casts Demonic Tutor. And I'm just here like, oh no. I'm not gonna die to Breach, am I? I'm just gonna die to Breach. After all of this, I'm gonna die to Breach. But it was a bait. Discover End, they got us. Like, they got me real good there. I thought for sure we were dead. He was so confident. But my opponent was a card short, and you know what, Slasher? I think because we cast Swords to Plowshares and we put our opponent to 1, they weren't able to use their fetch land and kill me. I think it's highly likely there that because we played swords and put them to 1, or probe or fetch. Yeah. Ooh, that was a sweat. But yeah, 3-0 start after beating Tinker. I guess technically Grixis Tinker, Aggro Shops, and then Grixis Tinker Breach. All right, so now we're 3-0. We're entering the 4th round out of 5. And we are up against we had to play against one of the top players, one of the top 2 players in Vintage, Discoveran, and then we get to play against the other one of the top 2 players, Bart, DM4X. Like I said earlier in the video, I highly suspected that Bart would be playing a combo deck. They would be playing Doomsday or PO or Tinker. I kind of thought that Bart would be on Esper Tinker, but as you'll see in this video, that was not the case. I like this hand. I have a Tinker, obviously, and I have a Force. I have some fast mana. I have a little bit too much mana, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers here. You got to keep your Tinker hand. It is unfortunate that my opponent gets full knowledge of my hand and knows my plan, but we play on. All right. So, yeah, my opponent tanks for a little while, picks their game plan, and fetches Underground Sea. Now, that obviously can still be any of the 3 decks. But then they duress me. And so now I know for sure my opponent is on Doomsday. And then I cry on the inside and say, help, help, I'm being hurt by Doomsday again. I have to force this because my only game plan is this Tinker, so I'm just hoping that I draw another piece of fast mana and my opponent doesn't have a counterspell. That's basically where we're at now. I'm never going to mulligan a hand with turn 2 Tinker and force backup. It's just, this is the best plays the deck can make. I would say that PO's plan A is Tinker, PO's plan B is PO, and PO's plan C is Mentor. So this is not a bad draw. This lets me sculpt a little bit and see if we can find something that does something to help us resolve this Tinker. What am I looking for here, really? My opponent knows my whole hand because we drew top for turn. I guess we just can spin for force if we need it. I did play around days. Yes, I did. I don't think I can afford to play around days for my Tinker, but my Sensei's top gets forced, and that's when I knew I was in trouble. And that's when I knew I was going to die. And yeah, so my opponent had Force, Duress, Probe, Consult for their Doomsday. But wait. But wait. So I'm super confused here because the pile I'm looking at is the revealed zone. And the revealed zone, for some reason, does not contain the 6 cards that are exiled with Demonic Consultation. And so my opponent Dark Ritual or consulted for Doomsday, and Doomsday was 40 cards down, and they exiled both of their oracles. My opponent got extremely unlucky here. I think like the percentage chance there of like missing a Doomsday and hitting both oracles was like, ooh, it was real low. It was real low. Someone can do the geometric calculator if they want. There was like 4 Doomsdays in the deck, 2 Oracles, and like, I don't know, 50 cards or something. It was bad. So yeah, they won game 1, but they were not lucky enough, so I won game 1. Here I get to do, I have a good sideboard plan. I have a good deck against Doomsday. From like, it's hard to even make a better PO deck against Doomsday. Like, I have double Lavinia, I have Teferi, I have 2 opposition agents, I have 4 Flusterstorms, I have a Dress Down, I don't even have a 13th land in my deck. It would be hard for me to make a better deck against Doomsday if I try. Like, I'd have to put a 3rd opposition agent. I'm never playing 3 opposition agents. Anyways, we go to game 2. We got there in game 1 due to our opponent being less lucky than us. And then I see this hand. I've got, a bit too much mana again. But I have a fast mana piece. I have a force. I have a probe to see their hand. I have a Dress Down, which can counter an Oracle for a turn. I'm gonna keep this hand. It's not a super exciting hand, but it's a hand you're gonna keep. Yeah, it's possible that they like hit some of their Doomsdays in their top 6. I don't know for sure because I can't go back and look. I guess I can go back and look. Hold on. We can do this. We have the power. Oh, that's the wrong premiere with top 8. I haven't actually gone back and looked. Round 4, game 1. I was like so confused during the match because I just didn't see the 6 cards that they exiled. All right, so their consult hit Oracle Doomsday. So yeah, the first Doomsday and the first Oracle got exiled in the top 6, and then there wasn't a second Doomsday for like 35 cards, and the second Oracle was in the top 35 cards. Crazy. Absolutely nutty. All right, back to the game. Yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I thought it was pretty, unique and interesting content for the viewers. So I'm pretty glad I recorded it. I think it ended up coming out pretty good. Are we still on 2 times speed, or what's going on here? I think we're on 2 times speed still. All right, so my opponent, of course, leads with Ancestral on their Molda 6. I choose to force this, and I choose to force this pitching Probe because Dress Down will give me, some extra time to deal with the Oracle. My opponent only had 9 cards left in their deck, Passion, so it would be hard for them to do such a thing. So here, obviously, drawing the 4th land is awful. And it actually is crazy, but it comes back to haunt me here that this is a Soul Ring and not any other Moxen besides Opal, because I actually can't cast Dress Down right now. To be fair, I didn't expect, after forcing Ancestral that I would still need to cast Dress Down, but it's Doomsday. And if you guys know anything about Doomsday from watching this stream, it's just completely busted. So my opponent cast Brainstorm, cast Dark Ritual, cast Doomsday. It's odd. I should out of force Ancestral. But yeah. So they cast Dark Ritual, they cast Doomsday here, and then I do have to map out. They can't kill me on this turn unless they have Street Wraith or Gush. So I start bringing out the notepad at some point here, if I recall correctly. Brainstorm, hell of a magic card. Let's skip through the Doomsday. All right, then I start building my notepad. And just as I start building my notepad, my opponent goes Street Wraith, and I die. Street Wraith back, Gush, Black Lotus, Oracle, kill me. Turn 2. After forcing Ancestral on turn 1, my opponent untapped and turn 2 killed me. Now, this is where I was saying if I had a Moxen instead of a Soul Ring, I could actually dress down this Oracle, and I would have a chance to win this game. It wasn't a lock to win this game because my opponent could go draw land, play land, or draw, play land, draw, play land, cast second Oracle. But so yeah, I just use this time to map out what my opponent has in their deck. Just get anything of note that is interesting or new. We saw that there's a Mind Break Trap in our opponent's deck right now, so it's good to keep a note of that. We saw at least a negation. We saw at least a duress, a daze. So just getting notes for what my opponent has in their deck. But we got Doomsday. So my opponent mulled to 6, cast Ancestral on turn 1, which we forced, and then they untapped on turn 2 and killed us. Not much we can do about that. So we run it back. It was obviously our hand was not super strong, but our hand contained a Force of Will and 2 cantrips. Obviously, we didn't want. You don't really want to have 3 lands in your opening hand as PO, but I think I'm pretty priced into keeping that kind of hand. And then I get 1 draw step. Obviously, it's another land brick. There are definitely draws that would have been good there if I had drawn one of the 4 Flusterstorms, another Force. Probably just like those are kind of it. Probe, Misstep, Ancestral. Obviously, Flusterstorm would have been the draw there. That gets me to a much better spot. If my opponent goes, my opponent might not go all in there if I don't tap out though. So it's not, nothing is set in stone there. Why are we not playing faster? Go. All right, we're back at 2 times speed. I thought so. Then I get to see this hand on game 3, which I like. This hand has the full Moxen suite of on-color Moxen. So I can PO on the first end step. I get to probe and see their whole hand. I feel really good about this hand. And my probe gets misstep, so I do not get to see their whole hand. And then I have to choose, do I play this Time Walk or do I hold it for a blue card for Force? I choose not to play this Time Walk, and I also choose not to play my Pearl because I don't want to play my Pearl into Mind Break Trap. So Justin played around Mind Break Trap. You heard it here first. And then my opponent gets to probe and see my hand, so now they know exactly what's going on my side. These restricted Phyrexian mana cards are quite good. And they have Black Lotus. I hate Probe so much. Probe sucks all the fun out of Magic. It's crazy. I draw a land, so I have a hard cast Force of Will. Not that it's very useful, because you can't really play this Force of Will because my opponent can play Daze or Fluster. So my opponent knows my whole hand, and they have 6 cards, a Lotus, and an Underground Sea. I don't crack this Flooded Strand because I don't want to get Opposition Agented. And then what happens? Let's speed through Doomsday player thinking. All right, Doomsday player fetches. And now what? Cracks Black Lotus and plays Doomsday. I do not cast Force for 5 mana because that runs me into Flusterstorm and it runs me into Daze. Obviously, I don't want to lose out on my Time Walk, but I want my Force to resolve here, and this is the best way that I can do to get my Force to resolve. My Force does resolve, but my opponent follows it up with Demonic Tutor. So now I have to top deck here. Dress Down is not a bad top deck by any means, but it's definitely not a PO. Like a PO or a Tinker, those would have been the greatest top decks. My opponent has Doomsday, follow up. Obviously, they probably have Doomsday because they Demonic Tutored. And then I do the futile effort of building a mapping again. Let's skip through Doomsday. All right, Doomsday resolves and I start mapping. I don't map this 100% correctly. I think I forget about a preordain. But what I map out is it's possible that they have both oracles, both forces, days. I don't know if they have a scroll or not post board. So I think I put scroll question mark. And I think scroll is supposed to be preordain here. But I did count that all of their flusters are gone. So they have like a daze and 2 forces. I'm hoping they have the days in their hand, so we played around the days by, you know, pitching to Time Walk. Obviously, Soul Ring is a terrible draw here. And now I have to choose about when to use my Dress Down. I want to buy a turn at least, a Merchant Scroll. But I think Merchant Scroll gets boarded out sometimes, so that's why I put question mark. So what I do is I cast this Dress Down in my end step so that it will last throughout their whole turn and I will get another turn. The problem is my opponent just has their Force of Will anyways. So they didn't have to put it in their pile. They just had Force of Will. So, you know, I had no chance. Nothing was ever close. And Doomsday is still broken. Obviously, I drew like badly. If I draw this top instead, or then you find a Flusterstorm, this gets to be a lot. It's going to be a lot different of a game. But that is definitely one of the downsides of playing PO is you have some amount of dead draws. And yeah, Doomsday. I can play 4 Flusterstorms, but if I don't draw them, they're not good enough. I don't really think my hands were indefensible. I think my hands were fine. They were low-powered hands, but they all had Force of Will. I don't think I would put back any of the hands that I kept here. So my opponent really beat us 3-0 in this match because they got unlucky on their console, like a 1 in 100, maybe even less on their console. So we really lost to Doomsday in all 3 games in this matchup, which is crazy to me because I have just so many cards. So many cards for Doomsday, but it's the best deck in the format, in my opinion, for a reason. And this is just another example of why I believe that's the case. So we're now going into round 5 of 5, and I am 3-1. And Nathan won the pair down, so I'm pretty confident that even if I lose this match, I will still get into top 8. But obviously, I want to win. I want to see how we can do. And the best we can do and make sure that we're in the top 8. I am playing against OO Sun-Q. OO Sun-Q, I put on Gak, and I knew they were playing Gak. Yeah, that's why I was so confused with Discover and not playing Doomsday. But I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. Like I said, I'm not a Doomsday player, so maybe I'm missing some key information. But to me, I don't understand why Doomsday isn't the best deck. I put that hand back. And the reason being is it just doesn't synergize well. Nothing really works with each other. I don't have any permanent mana sources. I don't have any lands. I think this hand is going to lose to Gak if you keep this hand. So So I decided to put this hand back. Discover and played Grixis Tinker Breach. So this hand is awkward. The only thing it really has going for it is Mystical for Ancestral. These are just 3 dead cards, basically. This is a kind of hand that can happen in PO. If you draw multiple POs or plus a bunch of clunky, tech cards, these hands just have to get put back. Just the nature of the deck. And then I get to this hand, and this hand is also kind of garbage. I wonder if I put this hand back too. I might put this hand back. Yep, I put this hand back. I just didn't do anything. And then I keep this hand on 4 cards. And it's my best hand by a large amount. And thankfully, because we're playing in London Mulligan, I get to keep this Ancestral. What do I end up keeping? I believe I would keep land, Ancestral, Force. Land, Ancestral Force. Wow, I put back a land? That's insanity. I don't like that very much. Sure. I mean, it worked out, but if I get wastelanded here, I would, in retrospect, I would, in hindsight, I would definitely not put back that land. I would have kept land, Ancestral Force, and tried to draw a blue card. Definitely a risky play, but it works out really well here because now I have Force for something, and then I can slam Lavinia. Lavinia is a really nice card to have in these decks because it hits a lot of other decks. Obviously, the main reason we're playing Lavinia is for the Esper Tinker matchup, but it also is extremely good against Gak. It counters Hogaak, Hollow One, Basking Root Walla off of discard, and Hogaak, Hollow One, Basking Root Walla, Force of Vigor, and Once Upon a Time. So it counters a lot of things. So here I get to resolve Lavinia. So now I don't have to worry about Force of Vigor. But my opponent does have a Vengevine in their hand, and they have a Bloodghast in their graveyard. So this game is not over by any means. I mulligan to 4 here. So this is actually going to be a really interesting game. My opponent has double Root Walla. Both Root Wallas are countered. However, the Vengevine will come back because they tried to cast both of them. The clock is now on, and I don't really have a lot of great ways to deal with the Vengevine. They have a Wasteland to bring back their Bloodghast, and they get to hit my white source. So this game is this great. No, opponent will have no answers to Lavinia. But the way they beat Lavinia is exactly what you're seeing here. They bring back Vengevines and Bloodghasts. Hard cast Deathrite Shamans and Oofs. It is totally feasible for Gak to beat a Lavinia. That's why it's kind of a soft counter. But yeah, so this is a game. This is absolutely a game. After a Multi-4 versus a Bizarre 7, we're gonna have an interesting game here. I'm mostly lucky my opponent didn't do anything crazy on turn 1, and we were able to get Lavinia down on turn 2 on the play. That is really helpful. My opponent goes for second Bizarre here, which seems pretty reasonable. All they want to do is funnel Vengevines and Bloodghast into the yard, so that makes a lot of sense. Gak now does play Boseiju to kill Sphinx. Most lists are playing 1 Boseiju main, 1 Boseiju board. The list that I was prepping for this event with Gak had 2 Boseiju main. So here I get to vamp, and there are interesting choices. I have Tinker, but I'm at 9 life. I have Yogwill, because I have an Ancestral and a Tundra in my yard. I have just Get Mentor, because Mentor is a way for me to play a creature game versus these Vengevine Bloodghast and possibly come out on top. There might also be the possibility of getting Yogwill and Mentor. If I were to go Black Lotus, Yogwill, Black Lotus, Tundra, Opal, Vamp for Mentor, Ancestral. It's possible there's a Yogwill line as well. think I choose Yagwil or Mentor. I don't remember if I came up with a Yagwil line or not. Okay, I did come up with a Yagwil line. So I'm at 7. I've got Black Lotus, Yagwil. Bring back Black Lotus. Wait, bring back Black Lotus. I can vamp for Mentor, repeal into Mentor. Vamp into Mentor, Ancestral. No, repeal. No, yeah, repeal? Vamp? Wait, what the hell did I just do? No, hold on, stop. Oh, I just cast Ancestral. Because if I hit a Moxen, then everything gets easy. Because I have repeal to cantrip. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I cast Ancestral, and I hit multiple Moxen and a top, which is basically perfect. Now we get to play the Mentor game. So why did I play the MOCS first? It doesn't seem like I needed to do that. Oh, did I need black mana? I don't remember. Yeah, I don't think I needed to play that Moxen first. Or maybe I did because I needed to make mana off of that. Interesting. I'm not sure if that might have been like one mistrigger. But here I get to get my Mentor, get my top. I get an Opal. I choose to spin and see what I have. Flusterstorm, Teferi, and Island are all bad. They don't do anything. Are they bad? Well, Teferi's actually good. So I keep Teferi. And so instead of fetching, I choose to play the Tundra out of my yard. It also, very importantly, doesn't cost me life to play the Tundra out of my yard. So that makes some sense. The Teferi's good, but the Fluster and the Island are not great. Interesting. And then I decide to play this Moxen just for the token so that I have 3 non-mentor blockers. And I missed this attack. That should have been an attack for sure. I should definitely have attack with Lavinia for 2 there. That's a missed attack. So basically my game plan now is every turn I need to make enough monks to not die. And eventually I will just overpower them. Like getting 2 tops out or something like that. And it's totally a playable game plan. And the only reason it's a super playable game plan is because we have a Lavinia in play, which stops my opponent from playing and resolving a Hogaak. Hogaak is what makes Mentor, like the Mentor defense not always work. But because Lavinia stops that, we actually have a really nice setup here. Another thing my opponent could be trying to do is they could always try to get lands and play Deathrite. But it looks like they're just trying to fill up their yard for the Vengevine. They decided that's the way they want to go, which is totally reasonable. Note the Bloodghast do have haste, but I do have to just trade off no matter what. So here I get to play a Teferi. I don't know if I'm supposed to actually bounce this Vengevine. I could see bouncing MOCS to just get another creature, because the Vengevine is probably coming back soon anyways. But it's not a guarantee. You also don't want to bounce the Vengevine because it gives them another card to use with their Bazaar. So I don't think I bounce the Vengevine here. I just don't know if I bounce MOCS to hold open Force and Fluster. I bounce the Vengevine? No. Stop. Play slower, Justin. Plus. I don't like that. Why am I plussing here? Why am I plussing? Why am I not bouncing MOCS Opal? That would also give me another spin. I don't like that. I want a Teferi minus there. Maybe I'm trying to hold Teferi minus in case they play a Deathrite Shaman. Not sure. I hold back Lavinia here in case they bring back Vengevine double Bloodghast. But again, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to just attack with Lavinia because I'm never blocking with Lavinia. And if I'm worried about holding back something, I should be bouncing my MOCS Opal to get another Monk token. I don't like how I played this. So they hit a third Bloodghast. They hit a third Bloodghast, brings back all 3 Bloodghasts with hastes. And then this attack would put me to 1. Or they can choose to tap 2 Bloodghast, play a Hogaak, and bring back a Vengevine, and the attack will put me to 3. Basically, the best possible set of draws for opponent here, I would suspect. I guess the only better set of draws would be Wasteland. Oh, this way they get a Dryad Arbor, so they actually only have to tap 1 Bloodghast, so I'm going back to 1 again. Yeah, I really wish I had bounced back my MOCS Opal and gotten another thing. Oh, wait, that's only the first spell. So they have to cast Hogaak twice to get back this Vengevine, and then I don't go to 1. I just stay. Interesting. I wonder if that's actually correct. My opponent could have played just attacked for these 3, and I have to go to 1. I actually don't think my opponent... I don't really like this play. If my opponent goes attack with these 4, I block and I block, I go to 1. They can still fetch Dryad Arbor and have 4 or 5 attackers on the next turn. I don't really like this play my opponent made. I don't take any damage here. Kind of interesting. So I draw with my top. You always want to draw with your top in your upkeep because it's going to give you another Monk trigger. Obviously, it's going to cost you 1 mana, but when you don't need the mana. So now I'm bouncing my Opal, and I'm getting a PO. And I have to choose... I definitely don't want to bring back Lavinia because it's going to be too hard to recast. I could technically recast, but I think it's better to not. Then my opponent concedes. I don't know if I would concede there. I would let me play it a little bit longer. Let me look at my hand. I don't actually have a second PO. I do have Teferi, bounce my own Crypt. Well, theoretically, in this situation, it's just gonna be a board state with where they can't break through the monks. Were they dead to if I block with Lavinia? Are they dead to monks? Kind of unlikely. 4, 9. I would have to cast 3 spells. Maybe not unlikely actually. Huh. Hold on, you're right. Maybe you're right. So if they make this attack and I block with Lavinia and I keep my monks. I block with Lavinia. I cast top as my first card. Opal is my second card. PO. Yeah, I guess I do have lethal. So that's a bad block from me. Good point. I think I was pretty bewildered at this point that they even went for this line because I think this attack is worse. Like, I think this attack is the best. I think the attack here... I think this attack is better, right? I'm forced to block with my monks in this attack. Yeah. So I was expecting my opponent to attack with this line, and then they didn't, and I didn't reevaluate. But yeah, I actually do have a lethal monk attack here if I chump with Lavinia and they have 0 cards in hand. That's a good point. I missed that. I think both avenues are likely going to win me the game, but one is deterministic, so definitely much better. Like, I'm almost always going to win on a PO for 4 here, for 5 here. My opponent just like does not have enough cards to beat through my stuff before I do something. But I guess technically I could draw and whiff here. Maybe if I got really unlucky, but it feels like probably going to win from there anyways. But yeah, definitely a missed deterministic lethal. So that's not good. All right, so I actually win my mulligan to 4 on the play. I made a bunch of errors actually in this match. This is the one of the match where I made a really bad error. In the last game. So in this matchup, I bring in my Graveyard Hate, my Tabernacle, an extra land against Wasteland, my Sphinx because they don't have a lot of answers to Sphinx. And then I take out some of the cards that are weak to Collector Roof. So I take out 1 Opal, 1 PO, 1 Top. You don't really need the Top, especially when you're boarding out Citadel. And then you can't protect a Narset. And Teferi was actually decent in that game, but I think in general, Teferi is not super good against them. It's pretty much, you know, a little bit of like a hard to cast expensive Time Walk. It's not, I don't really like it that much in this matchup. Obviously this hand is great. I'm going to always keep it. Just get a Merchant Scroll for Force and then cast a Tinker and try to protect my Sphinx. The downside is my opponent can have Beseiju, so you can't force Beseiju. You have to get a Needle. However, if I can get a Needle and protect my Needle with Force, then I'm locking my opponent out. Not all the time, no. It kind of depends. I think I keep in Citadel against Dredge a lot because Sphinx doesn't always beat Dredge. I think there's a lot of board states where Sphinx doesn't actually beat Dredge. So my opponent plays a hollow one. I probably go basic island, Sapphire, Merchant for Force. Yep. So this game, I'm definitely saying, hey, if you have Beseiju, I will lose. But I think it's okay. I think you can make that calculated risk. There is a misplay at the end of this game that I probably will point out. Yeah. So then I just put a Sphinx into play. It's gonna take 4 attacks. I need to find a Needle for Beseiju and 4 attacks, or before they find their own green source plus Beseiju. So this used to be lights out before Beseiju was printed. They would have to play like Land, Swords to Plowshares, and I have a Force of Will. However, now that Beseiju exists, this it's different for sure. My opponent is going to cast this Hogaak, and I don't force it because it doesn't actually change anything here. I won't die to their current board, so I can just keep attacking with Sphinx and it doesn't matter. The nice thing is I have Ponder and Fetch here to try to find my Needle. I do find a Swords, but I determined that Swords is not what I'm looking for. And so I just shuffle away. I'm not 100% sure that's correct because I could just take the Brainstorm and then use the Brainstorm and then fetch. And that gets what? That sees me 1 deeper and lets me fetch away bad cards. So I might have been correct to just take the Brainstorm there and then Brainstorm. I don't want the Dress Down, obviously. Doesn't do anything here. Good for me. So that's where the trouble begins, Larga. Beseiju doesn't always have a 2 mana cost. And that's what I forget. And it's pretty interesting what happens. So I should definitely repeal my MOCS in here. Still trying to find a Needle. I don't. Yeah, I PO, try to find a Needle. So here's the game. I have locked this game up. I have this game locked up. I draw my Tabernacle. But I don't play it. And here's why. It's highly likely that both my opponent and I will be into this top 8. And so it is. I did not play a Tabernacle in my last build of PO. And it's fairly uncommon to see Tabernacle in PO. So I felt that it would be more advantageous for me to hold my Tabernacle and to not show my opponent that I had Tabernacle. And my reasoning was, well, I can't lose because they need 2 mana to play their Boseiju. But they don't need 2 mana to play their Boseiju because Hogaak makes Boseiju cost 1 less. You know, then I tinker and I play a needle. And my Boseiju, or my needle resolves, and now the game is over. I go quickly look up which Boseiju it is. Nope. I got a needle, so now I don't have to show them, but Tabernacle. And that is when... and that is when my opponent messages in chat and says, oh, I think we both forgot. Or, oh, I forgot. and and they untap and they play a Boseiju. No, I don't think you're supposed to force the Hogaak. I don't think so. Oh, I can't even get back to where I was before. Shit. I needed the bar back. No. I don't think forcing the Hogaak is correct. I want force for after I have needle. I think the only real misplay is I was supposed to play this Tabernacle right here. Playing this Tabernacle here definitely wins the game. Like even if they Boseiju me, I don't care. Like I can definitely rebuild from here. I just play Tabernacle and Soul Guide Lantern. They kill their board, and I wipe their board, and I get rid of it like that. I had this game locked here, but I didn't do it. I tried to next level, and I got too greedy because I forgot that all they needed was 1 mana for Gak. So yeah, read the cards. I just forgot that Gak made it cost 1 less, but I didn't get punished. My opponent missed it. We both missed it. And I go 4-1 and make top 8. My opponent goes 3-2 and also makes top 8. I actually think Osunkyu is like one of the better Gak players too. It's just something that is not... The reduction cost on Boseiju for legendary creatures is not something that comes up super often. But it's an important one, and it's one you got to remember. It's good, I think, because now we can all watch me be an idiot and we all can all learn from it and hopefully not make the same mistake. Oh man, that one was so, I was sweating in my chair. I was like, no, what did I do? Oh boy. All right, so we go 4-1 and we make top 8. The top 8 includes a bunch of powerful wizards, including our opponent, Poker's Wizard. Now, Poker's Wizard, I fully expected to be playing PO or Tinker. And so I was very surprised when I found out my opponent was not on PO or Tinker. Obviously, this hand is completely nuts, so I'm going to beat PO and Tinker really easily with this hand. I'm super happy. This is just a straight Stone Cold Nutter Butter's Keep right here. It's insanity. Watch what happens in this turn. Oh my god, it's crazy. Oh, like I said, I was running pretty hot. So in my opponent's upkeep, I get to cast Ancestral, which resolves. I didn't expect the Ancestral to resolve. Like I said, I definitely thought Boger's Wizard would be on PO. And that resolves. And then I go Snap. And I cast an Ancestral. So in my opponent's turn 1 upkeep, I cast Ancestral, Snap Ancestral, Opposition Agent. And I fully expected my opponent to concede after Opposition Agent. But that is where I get surprised. I think it's possible you're supposed to concede this no matter what. But I definitely understand playing it out. They play Mishra's Workshop, which I wholly did not expect. So now, this opener was good against Shops, but it wasn't like this opener was lights out against Tinker. Like, Tinker, I can never lose. But Shops, I can feasibly lose here. It's not likely, but there are worlds where I can lose here. Tree Ball, I'm okay with. I don't know if my opponent thought I would let 3-Ball resolve, but by playing 3-Ball, they can't play any more spells this turn. I have more mana than my opponent, so it doesn't matter to me. So I'm okay with 3-Ball. Here I get to go Pearl, and then Academy Karn. It does make it so I don't have Force for a turn, but I think turning off their Crypt is more important. I don't kill their Crypt because I want the extra damage. But it does allow them to like play 2 cards off of Workshop. So they have a Nettle Cyst, which looks pretty reasonable on this board. Until you remember Karn's secret ability of kill your Germ token by turning the Nettle Cyst into a creature. That's one of my favorite secret abilities on Karn. So I kill off their Germ token, and I lose my Tolarian, but I still have enough mana to play 2 spells. I have Forces. My opponent does nothing with the Nettle Cyst. Probably should just attack. Obviously, the Sphere. My opponent had quite a good Shops hand, just not quite as good as my crazy hand. So we do end up still winning, but it was actually a closer game than any matchup versus Blue would have been, I think. But yeah, so I'm super thrilled. We had a nice broken turn 1 hand against Shops, and now we have 2 games to play against Shops in the quarters here. Same sideboard plan as last time. We're bringing in Hercules, Balance, Swords, Island, Sphinx, taking out some of our high cost cards. One of our Lavinias on the draw. Very normal thing. So then we have game 2 against Shops on the draw. This hand doesn't have any blue mana, so you can't keep it. Also doesn't have any lands, so you can't keep it. This hand is better. It's got lands. I don't think this is a great hand. And I decide to put back my island because I want to go for a turn 1 balance. Now, in hindsight, I don't know if that was really a good idea. Putting away my extra land to do this was a little sus. But I figure I can force their Sphere and then play my land, play all my MOCS in balance, and I'm going to get 3 or 4 cards out of their hand, and they won't have the ability to play, follow-up cards. The problem is my opponent played Wasteland on turn 1, so they actually get to kill my Tundra. The best thing that could have happened here was I draw a MOCS in, because then I would have been able to play my whole hand, and they would have gotten all of their cards out of their hand. Instead, I get to get 3 cards out of their hand, and they're going to have 1 card that was already in their hand and 1 card they draw for turn. So they waste my Tundra, they play a new Wasteland and a Patchwork Automaton. I draw this land, which is very crucial, because my opponent attacks with their Patchwork Automaton and the Ambush Viper comes out. And then we have a top deck war. My opponent strikes first with a Crucible of Worlds, so now I'm technically Wasteland locked. Cycle my Repeal, turn on my Opal. My opponent plays a Trinisphere, so now I'm Wasteland locked and there's a Trinisphere. However, I find Demonic Tutor, which means I can go Demonic Tutor for Tolarian Academy and play the Sphinx of the Steelwind. I'm also thinking about other things, like, do I want to just play a Karn? Do I want to play Soul Ring into Demonic Tutor? My opponent top decks is Nettlecyst, which is quite good. I just snap, get a Tolarian Academy. You don't want a PO. My opponent has a Trinisphere in play. So I then spin, and I find a new Karn, which is great, because that Karn will be useful later. But, so, yeah. I get to DT for Tolarian, and hardcast Sphinx of the Steelwind. And it's pretty hard for my opponent to come back from that. And there's like another nice example of the upside of having a robot and a Citadel to tinker for. Ballista's not a bad draw here. And Ballista would be a little annoying if it wasn't for my Karn that was coming. My Karn will just turn off this Ballista. And then my Karn once again uses its secret ability and turns the Nettlecyst into a creature, killing the Germ. And now my opponent can't make an attack that will kill Karn through my Sphinx, and my Sphinx is going to kill them in 2 turns. And this game is over. Saga is a nice way, but it's not fast enough against this Sphinx. I can even go Karn and get a Needle for Saga if I wanted to. However, I'm just going to kill off their Moxen in case they draw Tolarian and kill them in the air with Sphinx. And boom! Another Shops player vanquished, and on to the semifinals. All right, then here in the semifinals, we are on the rough side of the bracket, and we have to play against Nathan. If you don't know Nathan, you should start getting to know Nathan. The best Zoomer in Magic, multiple times MOCS Qualifier, MOCS Champion, basically really, pretty cracked. I didn't want to play against Nathan if I could help it, but, you have to beat the best sometime. And I do think that Nathan is like highly, highly likely to be on Esper Tinker. So this is a bit of a, a toss-up matchup where I think I'm slightly favored, but, the opponent's quite strong, and the decks are pretty evenly matched based on who has better hands. So yeah, this hand obviously I can't keep. This hand I can keep, but it's a little weak. I have to decide if I should put back the swords or the second land. And I put back the swords because the second land lets me Merchant Scroll for Ancestral and then have Flusterstorm back up if I draw Flusterstorm. I don't know if that's 100% correct. Like, the swords could be useful against Constructs or Lavinia or that kind of thing. I definitely have some doubts on whether putting back the swords is best there, but I don't want to put back Ruby because Ruby lets me... We're playing PO, we're not playing Tinker. Ruby is very important. Turns on all my Opal draws and sets us up for Tinker draws. Sets us up for PO draws. So I would never put back Ruby there. I think I would put back land or swords. And then I obviously get punished immediately by drawing another land. So I definitely wish I still had my swords. I'm going to have to Merchant Scroll for Ancestral here. I don't really have, alternatives. My hand was overall quite weak, and drawing a land as for your first turn is just not good enough. Yeah, that's kind of it. I don't like March because it doesn't always kill the things I'm trying to kill. Like, I want to be able to kill a Vengevine, and I want to be able to kill a Hogaak, and I want to always be able to kill an opposition agent and a Hull Breacher, and March doesn't always do that. So my opponent goes Island Ancestral, which is really bad for me. The first person to resolve Ancestral in these mirrors is heavily favored. Definitely not happy with that. Not much I can do about it. Obviously, if I pitch my force to counter their Ancestral, then they're left with top Saga and I have nothing, which is just not a winnable board state. I'm just hoping that things don't go too badly here. I can draw a blue card and resolve my own Ancestral on my turn. Maybe chain that into a PO and try to combo kill my opponent. Of course, I draw another Moxen. And now I'm thinking, do I hold up Hardcast Force? Or do I just cast this Ancestral? It's not really great either way. It might be the best option is to cast Ancestral on their upkeep, but like giving my opponent access to the Saga trigger is not ideal. Maybe it's best to just hold open Hardcast Force through the whole next turn. There are some arguments to every which way here. I don't think that one... It's possible I just want to cast Ancestral and hope they have nothing, but it feels so bad to do so. Oh, it's definitely tempo positive to blow up a Saga. Like, I think 1-for-1ing Saga is legitimately good. I know people have said it's not, but when I played like Disenchant and Disenchanted Sagas, it felt very good. I don't know. People have told me, like, it is situational, right? You have to have it exactly at the right time. Like, you can't have it a turn too late, but... So my opponent is not making constructs because constructs don't really matter. The thing that matters here is my opponent gets to tutor for an artifact, and that artifact can either be Key or Lotus or Soul Ring, and those are all very good. And I'm just super, super far behind. My opponent has 7 cards in hand. I have 3, and... Well, it's not good, basically. I think in general, hitting a Mox in with a removal spell is not good, but I think hitting a Saga is. So my opponent plays Mentor, which I'm fine. Am I fine with? Can't remember. Yeah, I think I'm fine with it because it doesn't really matter. And then they play Lavinia after playing Mentor, which is the more important card, so I force it. I think it's fine to just play Lavinia first. Maybe they're just trying to bait with Mentor. Not really sure. But my opponent obviously has Fetch Land Fluster here. So now I am locked out of casting Moxen that I draw. So this is like, I shouldn't have a Tundra in my hand. I should have a Swords to Plowshares in my hand, and I would have a removal spell for this Lavinia. So maybe, yeah, maybe that first mulligan decision is really not good. But I believe they have a mental misstep, right? Yeah. So it didn't actually end up mattering, but maybe I would have been able to like Swords the Lavinia. It gets mental misstep, then I resolve an Ancestral. I just still don't know if I'm going to win through that. Seems fairly unlikely. So, but it's just kind of what happens when your opponent resolves Ancestral before you in this matchup, especially when you're on a mulligan and you draw too many lands. So I do think that the decision to bottom the swords may have been incorrect and could have definitely contributed to me losing that game. But I think in general, it was just super hard for me ever to win that game. I just didn't have the cards to beat what my opponent had. So yeah, same board plan as always. We're going to bring in the opposition agent, and we're going to bring in the Flusterstorm and the swords. This game is really interesting because I make a pretty large blunder to start this game, and the game goes a lot longer after that. So game 2 is pretty interesting. I'm kind of excited. I haven't watched it back yet. What are we waiting for? Probably double Q in a draft or something. All right, so obviously I have this hand that I'm going to keep. I have a nice setup, and then I get to go Ancestral on their upkeep, and it's just a really nice start. I don't have a force, but I do have PO and Misstep, and this is where I immediately blunder. I see my opponent's board, and I go, I need to play around Hull Breacher. And then immediately blunder into not playing around opposition agent. So I want to fetch and play Teferi for Hull Breacher or Lavinia, but this gets me opposition agented. And so my opponent casts opposition agent with my fetch land on the stack, and I respond by POing for 2, try to draw force. I miss on my force, but I do hit a non-fetch land, so that's really clutch. And obviously I get to resolve all of these. So my opponent then, takes a lot of time and looks at my whole deck list because it's fairly new information, and takes out the second Tundra probably. No, actually maybe takes out the second Underground Sea. Yeah. So my opponent takes out the Underground Sea, and then I play all of my mana. My opponent also has a vague idea of what is in my hand. They should probably be able to see what's in my hand, but I don't believe Magic Online lets them do that. How do I play around opposition agent there? I just pass. Land pass. Go for an end step PO. If they play the opposition agent and use mana, you crack a fetch. It's very, very reasonable. Obviously, it's not the most powerful play I can make, but it's totally a reasonable line I can make. So my opponent plays a top. I misstep it. They should know about my misstep at the very least. Opposition. So they still have the mana for another opposition agent or a Hull Breacher. So first I play Lavinia so that my Teferi is going to resolve. I have a lot of time here, so I can take my time and play my Lavinias first to get their forces out of their hand. So they do have a Hull Breacher. So now my opponent has Hull Breacher and opposition agent, and I made a misplay where I lost my first land drop, or second land drop. But this is not over because I have Teferi, which is quite good in this kind of situation, as well as Lavinia and Snapcast. All of these cards are quite good in this situation. So I play my Lavinia first, and then now I know my spells can resolve. I make a decision here to not wait on the Snapcaster Mage to get value with Ancestral. I decide it's better. I'm at 12, so it's 2 swings here, and it's better to just get the blocks in. And I don't believe I block with this Lavinia, but Hull Breacher is really important to remove. And opposition agent is annoying, but Hull Breacher is the one I definitely want to remove. So Ambush Viper strikes again for the second time this tournament. And now I can untap and Teferi back the opposition agent, and they can't recast it in the same turn. So now I have a Teferi. I bounce the opposition agent. I get to respin. I have a force for the opposition agent coming back down. And I'm just going to put this Delta on top so I can get new. I'm going to put the Flusterstorm for now, and then I'll probably spin the Delta on top. I would suspect. So now I can force the agent when the agent comes back down, because I still have Fluster for like a second spell, Tinker, or anything like that. Yo, what's up, Lotus? Congrats. Yeah. And so they have a demonic here, which I can't fluster. I believe I decide to just force it, if I can remember correctly. I think it's. Oh no, I don't. They get to. I let them tutor. Interesting. I think I determined that I would be able to fluster a lot of the things they tutor for or force them. I'm not exactly sure what the logic is here. I don't think there's anything that they can tutor for that would not be forcible that would be problematic. Like Saga's not really annoying here. It looks fine. Kind of an interesting spot. I'd like to know what Nathan tutored for here. I'm not sure what they end up tutoring for. We'll see if we can figure it out from the rest of this game. But I remember being confused during the match. So they tutor for something and then they play opposition agent. I force the opposition agent. And then I spin the delta to the top to fetch it away. I'm looking for a PO here to win the game. I don't find a PO. I find a dress down. I don't want to dress down. I crack away my dress down. I spin again and I find PO and Karn. And then I draw my PO. My opponent can't cast counter anything because I have a Teferi. And then now I'm just winning from here. Yep. So now I have 4 swords, Karn, Lavinia. Kill the jet. Turn the Tolarian smaller. Oh, I think they get Tinker because I think they Tinker here and I let it resolve, and that was probably super sus. Yeah, they Tinker here and I let it resolve. I could force it, but I have a Lavinia in play, so I figure it was better to let it resolve. And I know that I can Teferi bounce it at some point or just attack their life total. In hindsight, I kind of dislike it. It lets them use their lands as like ways to filter the top of their library. So I do kind of wish I had just forced it, but I let it resolve. It's not a huge deal. But yeah, this is a crazy game because I played into a Hull Breacher. Not Hull Breacher. I played into an opposition agent on turn 2, which got my fetch land. My opponent resolved an opposition agent and a Hull Breacher in this game, and PO still on top. No, I think Falcon Eye's right. I think the first one got countered. So yeah. Kind of a crazy game too. And I was feeling pretty good after this because I thought for sure the game was over after the fetch land blunder. But we were able to pull it back. So yeah, we actually end up picking up game 2, which is crazy. I thought that was one of the more interesting games of the whole tournament because there were like a bunch of really interesting decisions and a little back and forth. That was probably one of the more interesting games, I would say. No, I mean, could have Swords the Plowshares the BC. I don't know. I think Snapcaster is a must play in PO. I think the first Snapcaster mage is so good in PO, especially when you have swords and fluster and that kind of thing. I really enjoy one snap in PO. I don't know what you're talking about, Oz. Swords of Plowshares, the what? I don't know what you're saying. Yeah, top 4 of this tournament didn't really get you. I mean, the best prizes are in you're just winning. Winning is the best prize. Oh, Carnet and Swords it? No, like I came to the conclusion that the Citadel didn't matter, right? I let the Citadel resolve and I let it sit and play. I just don't think it mattered. I'm not 100% sure if like I would do that again, but all right. So game 3, I have to mulligan my first hand, but my second hand is feasible. I have Ancestral, I have multiple Moxen, I have Misstep. This hand is totally reasonable. I am on the draw, and my opponent did keep 7. But this hand feels like a hand that could win. I have to shoot. This is an interesting misstep decision. I've been missing. I don't know if you're always supposed to misstep this, but in testing, I was misstepping Tim's early ponders a lot, and they were very good. I don't know if that's just like a limited amount of testing, but I kind of decided at some point that aggressively misstepping this was good against Tinker, so I decided to misstep this ponder. I didn't draw a land or a Moxen, and so I decided to fire this Ancestral off now. I know that my opponent can't Flusterstorm me, but I obviously am running into 4 force and 2 negation. But I don't have a land drop. I don't have a Mox drop. I think it's important that I attempt to resolve this Ancestral now. My opponent has Force of Will, pitching Lavinia. I play my Opal, and I am pretty rough here. I need to draw something good, and then Opposition Agent is a rough follow-up. It's not a terrible follow-up because I can, draw a Moxen, and then turns on my Opal, and I can Swords this Opposition Agent. I don't draw a Moxen the first one, but then I draw a Pearl. So the Pearl is quite good, because now I can play Lavinia and Swords to Plowshares. But my opponent does have Opposition Agent and Constructs. So this game is not over. I think I take this opportunity to just Swords this, which actually comes back to bite me. Interesting. This game, so up until this point, I'm like, well, if we draw a Moxen or a land, we have a good chance of winning with PO. And then my opponent fetches a Soul Ring off of this Urza Saga, which is the worst possible thing that could have happened because it signals to me that they have Hull Breacher or Opposition Agent. And so I can't crack this here. And if they have an Opposition Agent, I would lose. I probably should crack it anyways and go for it, just because I am out of time. But I choose to wait. They don't play anything, so then I crack it in their upkeep, assuming they have nothing. They don't have an Opposition Agent. And so I'm like, okay, maybe this is winnable. I'm going to cast my PO now before they can have access to draw Flusterstorm. And then they flash in Hull Breacher. And I die. So if I had chosen to not Swords the Opposition Agent, I would have taken 3 extra damage down to 7. I wouldn't have had a really good opportunity to Swords this Hull Breacher anyways, and I have to chump, so it probably didn't matter. Yeah, I mean, I have to cast it. They have a Breacher, and they did. They had a Breacher, and then I die. So it was very close here. If my opponent doesn't have a Breacher, I think it's a very, very winnable game. Oh, I couldn't have fetched if they had an Opposition in play. Yeah. So, like, if my opponent fetches, like, a Soul Guide Lantern, not a Soul Guide Lantern, a Sensei's Top instead of a Soul Ring, I just jam PO on my turn, and maybe I win. But unfortunately, they had their 1 Hull Breacher, which is, just unlucky. Not much I can do. I think I drew, like, pretty well to even get to that spot, so not too bad. My opponent just, they had the right cards there. So these were my 3 cards that I would have drawn, and then I would have been able to chain POs, and I would definitely win this game. I just needed to dodge the one Hold Breacher. It's very sad. But it was close. It was very close. So close. So yeah, that's it. I die in the top 4 here to Nathan, who goes on to lose against Shops in the finals. But overall, this tournament was, I would say, a very large success. I was very happy with the deck that I registered, the choices I made. And I think I made the best. I don't know. I feel like I had the second best deck in the field. I kind of feel like the Doomsday deck was the best deck, but I was pretty happy with this turnout. Like if a couple things go like a little bit better, I can beat Nathan, and then I get to have my rematch versus Lotus in the finals, and I still have 4 Hercules recalls in my 75, so I feel pretty good about it. But you know, it's Magic, and those Tinker matchups are very close, and they can be determined by one player resolving one extra spell. And it didn't go my way this time, but I think a lot of the other matches in this tournament I ran extremely hot, so I can't really complain. Like that starting hand against the Poker's Wizard, the other Shops player, where I cast Ancestral, Snap Ancestral, and opposition agent in their first upkeep. Like, you don't get those kind of hands every day, so overall pretty happy. I think for an open field, I wouldn't play this list. I would play I would probably play one Lavinia out, one Island back in. I would probably play the list that I played to qualify for the event with. Maybe you will keep the opposition agent in instead of the dress down. Yeah, this is probably fine. I would just take a Lavinia out and put the Island back in, and then I would play this deck. I think this is a pretty good open field, Esper Tinker heavy metagame PO list. Yeah. So overall, looking at Vintage as a whole right now, there's been a lot of talk about Tinker. Is Tinker too good? Is Saga too good? And all of my testing and all of my knowledge, experience and looking at this, and I don't feel like Tinker is, well, I mean, the card Tinker is broken. Tinker for Bro Citadel is broken. But the Esper Tinker Saga deck, I don't feel like is too good or should be played as much as it is being played. I don't really see any convincing reason why Esper Tinker should be, the most played deck by this amount, by, in 20% of fields. I think that PO is favored versus Esper Tinker. I think that Hogaak is favored versus Esper Tinker. I think that Gak is favored versus Esper Tinker. I think that Squee is probably favored versus Esper Tinker. I think there's like 5 decks that are all tier 1 tier 1 or tier 2 decks that are all favored versus Esper Tinker. And I'm confused on why the Esper Tinker deck is being played so much more than these other decks. I don't really get it. Maybe someone else has other ideas, but I think the best deck in the format right now is Doomsday. Doomsday is putting up crazy numbers. Doomsday is favored versus most of the top decks. I think Doomsday is by far the best deck in the field. And then I would put PO as the second best deck. I think PO is favored versus Tinker and is still really powerful versus the rest of the field. And then I would put Tinker and Gak next. The problem with Gak is it's bad against Doomsday, but it's still really good against these other things that are happening. So yeah, Saga is not bad. You can play Esper Tinker Saga. It's a good deck. It's a winning deck. But I just don't think it should be this much of the field. I don't think that the metagame should be in an unhealthy position. I don't think it should take up this much of the field. I think it should just be another piece of the puzzle. So, I don't know. That's my thoughts right now on the metagame as a whole. I obviously am always an advocate for unrestrictions. I think that channel should be unrestricted. I think that Library of Alexandria should be unrestricted. I think that Thorn of Amethyst should be unrestricted. But I don't really think that Saga is the tipping point here. I don't think Saga is the thing that really makes those decks super powerful. It's definitely good against a section of the metagame, but like if the best two decks are Doomsday and PO, both those decks don't really care about Saga. So I don't really get it. But yeah, I talked at length about why I choose not to play Saga in PO specifically at the beginning of this video. So if you haven't seen that already, you can go back to the beginning if you're in Twitch chat and watch the beginning of it. But I just wanted to give a little brief update because I know people have been asking me this. Like, I don't think that it's like super good to have Tinker be 20% of the metagame, 30% of the metagame. I don't like that. I don't want that, but I also don't think it should be. So I do feel like there's probably still room for metagame shifts because three of the four decks that I consider the best in the format should all be favored versus Esper Tinker. So yeah, that's it. That's the whole shebang. Does anyone have any questions about this event, about this deck, about Vintage that I can address right now? Now would be a good time. Anyone in chat? Am I confident about Hogaak being favored versus Esper Tinker? I'm like reasonably confident, and I think you can make the deck even better versus Esper Tinker. Like I think that the current builds of Hogaak are not configured in the best possible way to beat Esper Tinker. You can build your deck with more Collector Roofs in the main, with more access to fast mana. Like so people cut Black Lotus, I think that's insane. Don't cut Black Lotus. Play some Elvish Spirit Guides, which you can find off Once Upon a Time, which lets you cast turn 1 Collector Roof. Don't play as many Blood Gas because Blood Gas aren't as good against Esper Tinker. I think that the Hogaak deck can be built even better than it is, and I already feel that the Hogaak deck is favored versus Tinker. It's definitely favored pre-board. Post-board, it gets a little bit worse. But no, I don't like 2 Lavinia. 2 Lavinia was absolutely a metagame call for that event where I suspected 50% of the field or more Lavinia would be good against. I would play Lavinia, the second Lavinia in the sideboard. Would I play a Whisper? Yeah, it's okay to play Whisper. It's a little awkward playing Whisper because like the fetching black mana and that stuff. But Whisper is totally viable. I tend to play Dress Down over Whisper these days. So I probably would play more Dress Downs. The fact that Dress Down turns off Lavinia, turns off Opposition Agent, Hull Breacher, Collector Roof. I think that Dress Down is super good. I would play more Dress Downs before I played Night Whispers. But I don't think if someone registered a Night Whisper or 2 Night Whispers in PO, I think that's totally fine. I'm okay with that. Vintage Noob, is Doomsday too strong as best deck in the format? If there is a reasonable way to help solve it. When Doomsday is the best deck, or when Doomsday was the best deck in the format and was played a lot, people did build their decks in ways that made their deck better against Doomsday, and Doomsday's win rate did come down. But those ways are really crazy. They're like 4 Flusterstorm main, that kind of thing. I mean, I don't agree with Raphael there. I don't want to you don't unrestrict misstep. The problem with good permanent base hate against Doomsday is Doomsday's too fast, in my opinion. Like, theoretically, everybody else has games versus Doomsday where they don't kill you on turn 1 or turn 2. But that is just not my experience. Like, you have seen probably 30, 40 Doomsday matches on my channel in the last year, and the vast majority of the games I die on turn 1 or 2. So, who knows? Who knows? All right, I'm running out of voice here. So thank you for everyone who is watching, and especially thanks to anyone who made it to the end of this video on YouTube. Definitely appreciate the support. We just passed 2,500 subs on YouTube, which is a great number, and I'm really happy with the growth that we've seen over on that platform. I hope everybody enjoyed the testing videos. For the Twitch chat, there's still 4 more days of testing videos with Falcon Eye that are getting published in the next 4 days. And then after that, I will publish this video and I assume my challenge VOD would be following that. So I hope you are enjoying the vintage content, and I will see you in the next one.